We'll be discussing 2016's book, Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, a book I love. It's a powerful memoir that exposes the author's journey from a disadvantaged Appalachian upbringing to personal and professional success.
J.D. Vance has had a meteoric rise in the Republican Party. From a best-selling author and never-Trumper in 2016...
I'm a never-Trump guy. I never liked him.
...to winning a U.S. Senate seat at age 38. And now, he's former President Donald Trump's running mate.
Elect Donald Trump in 2024. God bless you, sir.
We're going to have an interesting discussion today about the rise of Trump, popular surge in America, and politics, as well as some topics like housing, motivation, what does it mean to be happy, what does it mean to be successful. Hope you'll join us. If you're just joining us, I'm Jonathan Munk.
And I'm Britt Brewer.
And welcome to another episode of the Bookwise podcast.
From BookClub.com.
Britt, have you heard about this book before?
I have heard about this book. I remember after Trump got elected in 2016, there was a lot of people scrambling to read it, a lot of coastal elites who were scratching their noggins. How could this have happened? And I think this book was on the top of everyone's reading list.
So it's essentially documenting JD's life growing up in a rural part of America in the South, very poor, very sort of multicultural, but he happens to live in a pretty white part of the country, at least his little town is. But just the crazy stuff that happens as he tries to go from this, one of however many millions of kids growing up in poverty in the rural part of America to eventually getting out, now a professional success in a ton of different ways.
Hillbilly Elegy hit a nerve in the presidential election cycle. Vance became a go-to guy on cable and in print, a CNN commentator, a contributor to the New York Times.
Wow!
He became a guide to the anger, rebellion, and pessimism in the communities that carried Donald Trump. He understood what they cared about and didn't.
I don't know if you've ever seen any interviews by JD or not, but this is a memoir. So everything he writes in the book is true. And he's doing an interview here and he's talking about this crazy experience that he had. And he talks about it in the book. Let's check this out.
Your grandmother, Mama, once told your grandfather, Papa, that if he ever came home drunk again, she'd kill him. He did, and she almost did. Tell us that story.
Yeah, that's right. So when he came home drunk, he passed out on the couch. And my grandma was not one for sort of taking things lying down. So she decided she was going to honor her word. And she poured gasoline on him, as I write in the book, and lit a match to him. And he sort of, a part of him caught on fire. And it was my aunt, who at the time was 11 or 12 years old, who sort of leapt into action and saved him from potentially burning to death. It's funny, or maybe just morbid, but I think a little bit of both, that when I was talking about this story with family later, someone said, JD, I think maybe you didn't get that story quite right. And I think, oh no, what detail have I messed up that I put in the book? And they said, I think that it was lighter fluid, not gasoline.
It's crazy, right,
Wow.
Britt? I mean, so what's your reaction as you hear that?
Well, first, lighter fluid over gasoline. Hell yeah. That means truly an Appalachian. That's a real Appalachian move.
The book's really just like, how did his life unfold and transform so much? And what were the circumstances that he faced in his upbringing? And how did he leverage those things to help him and escape the negative things that held him back from being able to be successful in that way? And one of the topics that it's discussed a little bit, but is sort of an undertone to the book, in my view, is just this theme around housing policy and home ownership and the poverty cycle and how those things relate. And you've lived a fair amount of your life in the South.
I would say anecdotally, it's tough. You go through in a lot of these towns, especially in the Rust Belt or especially in Appalachia, the opioid crisis. I don't know if he touches on this, but it's very, very apparent, especially in rural Kentucky, in rural West Virginia. But, you go through these towns and you'll go through the downtown and you can tell that at one point it was thriving. At one point, there was, I'm guessing probably from the 40s to the probably 70s, there was, and even part of the 80s, but I think things really started to change probably in the 80s. This was a town, and people, had factory jobs and they were like, they had their lives sort of set, and they had pensions, and they could work at a place for 40 plus years, and they could have a community. And now you drive through and there's a Walmart. So there's always a Walmart.
It's rough. There's prevalence of that stuff. And, the mines closed, the factories closed, the economic engine closed. And then what, right? People are forced out. They can't stay. And what you see in the book is just, you live in a trailer. You don't live in a house. Your neighbors live in trailers. And what's the problem with that? Well, at one level there is no problem with that. At another level, trailers depreciate in value. Houses appreciate in value, and so there's no sense of intergenerational or intragenerational economic mobility just through property ownership, because there is no property ownership happening. And that's just such a huge part of what drives, or actually doesn't drive, the economy in a lot of rural places in America, is that if you own a house that's a trailer house and you pay $100,000 for it, in 15 years it's worth $20,000. If you bought a house with a foundation and a traditional single family living situation, you paid $100,000, in 20 years it's worth $250,000, and you've just created some wealth for your family or yourself that you can pass along and capitalize on. And I think we just sometimes underestimate the power of what some of the housing policies and economic, just the affordability of housing in general, home ownership specifically, is causing in America. It is so hard to get out of whatever your current economic position is if you don't have access to real property ownership of some kind, real assets.
It sounds like what you're saying is, Munk, don't put wheels on a house, because the second that you put wheels on a house.
I've looked into this extensively, Britt. There's does it have axles? Does it sit on a permanent foundation? And what does permanent mean? Basically, it's like a few very, very tactical laws that exist everywhere.
I mean, I have a few cousins in Tennessee, and I could just see them being, like knocking off the wheels, just sticking it in some concrete and being like, it's a house. It's a house now.
You talk about community, and that's a huge theme in the book, is everyone is part of a community, and you work together as a cooperative community to help each other. Your neighbors know everything that's going on with you. You know everything that's going on with them. So-and-so has a problem. You're there to help them. You're not putting anyone out by asking someone to do something. And now, the world I live in is, if I'm out of town and a package gets dropped off on my porch, I ask my neighbor to go pick it up, and I feel a little bit guilty. Like, hey, can you go over and pick up that package so it doesn't get stolen off my porch? That's like the level.
I'm sorry. Who are you again?
But that's like the level of closeness and the tight knit nature of communities as they used to be versus how they are now, or maybe more poor communities versus better off communities is very different.
Yeah, and we'll do anything not to have to talk to someone. We'll be like, please leave it at my door. Only ring my doorbell if you have to. But I don't want to talk to you.
And drive through, self checkout. This is the theme that comes up too. Is just as he gets more, he's like striving to get an education. There's this interesting balance of, don't you ever forget who you are, what stock you came from, your family, our traditions, our values, your own grit, our own grit as a community, the people that brought you this far, like that side of it is real. Because I work in business so much, I think about, as a manager, I've used that principle, which is called the Peter Principle, right? And it talks about upward mobility in a career, and it talks about like you can fail your way up. But part of the principle is also you rise to the level of your own incompetence. And so you get as far as you can go. And then once you're at your level of incompetence, like that's when you stop growing. That's also where you start failing because you're no longer competent to do that job. There's undertones of that in this book too, right?
I would say the one.
Britt, bring it down to earth again.
Of course, Debbie Downer over here. Hey guys, it's me. The other X factor is, and I'm not saying that that's this, but when you were talking about failing upwards, it made me think of many careers in Hollywood, and unearned confidence, or just confidence, just whatever you want to call it, blind confidence. It's so, especially in America, it is like, if you can just keep your head down and just keep going ahead and just have this like innate belief in yourself, even if everybody around you is like, no, it's never going to work. And you're like, I'll tell you what's going to work, this and me. Like, you can go very far.
I think that's something that's just missing from our society today is like, yeah, well, if you work hard, you can have success. And we point to all these stories of people that have had success. But the risk tolerance and the fear and how you manage that risk and how you manage that fear and how you think about consequence when it comes to aspiration, it is incredibly hard to get to. And I just, that's why I just have so much admiration for people like JD, because what would have happened if he didn't get in?
One of the biggest fears is fear of the unknown, right? And so when you are, people talk a lot about Nepo babies, and it's like, sure, they had a leg up, but you know what they had that was the most important is that they had been swimming in these waters for a long time. They knew what these waters were like. So, if you think about someone who's applying to Harvard, maybe they went to like an elite boarding school. And so they've been in that environment, and their parents went there. So they have the confidence and the know-how. And this person who is from this completely, might as well be Mars, like thinking about rural Ohio, going to, an elite Ivy League. Yeah, what they have is the unknown of what this world is.
And there's also just all the ancillary stuff, like if you're comfortable flying on a plane, if you know that you have to match your shoes and your belt, if you, know how to book a hotel, if you know like what tipping culture looks like in high-end restaurant, if you know like how to take the subway in, on Manhattan Island, like the things that we just don't, like if you've lived this for a long time, that is not even part of your stress. But if you're new to all of it is new, and all of it is stressful, and all of it is a stretch, and all of it takes a toll, and all of it's emotional.
And also, just hearing you talk about this, the fact that I'm guessing that he did all these things himself, right? Like it wasn't like he was a legacy, student, or it wasn't. And I think about when you do things yourself and you know that you did them yourself, that is in itself confidence, right? That is like competence equals ultimate. Confidence.
It's
right.
100%. It's the ultimate confidence to know you did it, and you did it on your own because no one else could do it for you, and you accomplished it.
I was talking to this woman last night, and she was talking about her daughter, and her daughter's 19. Her daughter worked as she was babysitting, I think over the past, I want to say 2 years. She saved $30,000 and she bought her first home.
Wow.
And she was so proud of her daughter. And I was like, that's incredible. That is truly, truly incredible. And I feel like our generation, well, maybe, but it just seemed like it was like a lot of people who were like, I want to be a rock star, but I don't know how to make eggs. Yeah. And it's like, we all can't be rock stars, and you should know how to make eggs.
Very good. Words of wisdom from Britt on that. If you are look, this is not a new book. Hillbilly Elegy is the name. It came out in 2016. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. If you want to know about economic mobility, if you want to know about rural America, if you want to learn a little bit about politics and some of the origins of the political climate that we're now in, I highly recommend the book. Thanks for listening today. I'm Jonathan Munk.
And I'm Britt Brewer.
And this has been another episode of the Bookwise Podcast
From BookClub.com. Happy reading, everyone.